Okay, then. Yep, that works. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to your morning cup. We have a lot to talk about. The biggest election in the free world is here. I believe, on the 5th of November, everything changes for the next 4 years. Do you have an election wherein someone who is supposedly labeled as the next coming of Hitler takes over, or do you have someone who people have labeled the worst potential candidate ever to compete in these elections? You see, propaganda runs deep from both sides. But if you look at it from a third person's perspective, someone who's not involved in this ecosystem whatsoever, but someone who's from a country wherein it has humongous impact, well, it leaves us with not much choice but to look at both sides, look at what both sides are putting forward, and then talk about it. So, the entire format is pretty simple. We have one source from the left, we have another source from the right, and we have two sources from international news agencies. It'll all make sense once we dive straight into it. Also, another thing before we get started, I wanted to address was something that's really interesting to me right now is the fact that if you just search the 2024 United States presidential election on Google, sure as hell hope that there is some amount of neutrality that is maintained and there is no leaning towards left or right from such companies, at least. Yeah, there's a lot of speculation out there about what YouTube does, but when it comes to Google, I would much rather hope that not everyone has to switch to DuckDuckGo to get accurate search results. There have been a few issues with Google search as well, but that's a topic for another time. But jumping into first, let's look at what a British newspaper source has to say about the 2024 elections. And of course, who better than the BBC? So the BBC, in a nutshell, has essentially just highlighted the fact that, yeah, these two are going head to head. If you are leaning towards either side, who gets what? The biggest question now, will America get its first woman president or a second Donald Trump term? Election day approaches. Who's leading the national polls? Now, this is the basically the fruit of the matter, the bone of contention, the polls. Every single source that we look at today is going to have a different poll put up. The left will have a different poll, the right will have a different poll, and then certain neutral parties have a different poll as well. The BBC has a poll on their website on an article that they have pushed for this very election, which clearly highlights that by 1 percentage point, Kamala Harris is in the lead to be the next president of the United States. It's a huge deal because every single person in the UK who looks up anything to do with the United States elections and goes through the BBC looks at this. So, even though we as outsiders have no say when it comes to, hey, does it even make a difference because we're not the ones voting, well, given the fact that it's the biggest election of the free world, given the fact that the US has enormous influence on every single economy across the globe, specifically the UK, I would say that it's a huge deal. Now, can this be trusted? What is this based out of? Well, the source that the BBC mentions for this very poll is ABC News. Now, some might argue that ABC is left leaning. But if BBC has chosen to affiliate its sources from ABC, that's up to them, and that's the prerogative that they are painting. And our objective here is not to like go and find kinks in people's armors. It's to basically address the fact that if you look at it from global news perspectives, if you're not in the United States, if you're not in the Americas, and if you're not in the UK and you still look things up, this is the perspective that you get to witness, be that as it may. And it's not just me who's a random researcher looking into things like that to make it an awareness campaign. It's people that are in powerful market driven positions people that handle millions of dollars worth of stock in every single country's stock market. So does it matter to them? Yes, it does. Does it influence their buying and selling of shares? Yes, it does. Keep that in mind. Venture capitalism will be affected directly based on the results of this election. You cannot negate that. We scroll further and we see this is what happened during the presidential debate between the two. Kamala Harris took a ginormous leap above Trump during the debate and even after it. And again, either side has its own talking points when it comes to this debate. It was evident that Trump was not able to cope with a lot of things that were thrown his way. And then if you look at the rhetoric on the right, they will obviously highlight the fact that Trump was fact checked again and again and again, and Kamala Harris was not fact checked. And the biggest example of Kamala Harris not being fact checked is the fact that she made a blatant claim. And the claim was there are no soldiers in active war zones today. And there's a viral video of soldiers that are American soldiers being deployed in an active war zone, watching the debate live and questioning to themselves and each other as to where the hell were they then. That kind of rubbed everybody the wrong way, be it leftists or right-leaning people. That was unfortunate, to say the least. But moving swiftly on, there's also a poll. Again, everything that you see on the BBC's website is currently being sourced from ABC News. If you believe ABC is left-leaning, then you should, of course, keep that in mind while you're considering all of these data points. These are apparently swing states, as they call them in the United States. And, well, if you look at a country wherein there are a fixed number of states that are locked to left and a fixed number of states that are locked to the right, it all boils down to these swing states. Whoever wins these swing states, who can switch either way, wins it all. That's how it works. Currently, you see a lot of red, you see barely any blue. So that is again something that should be considered. Now, this is just going to be random data points that give you an insight as to what is happening in each particular swing state. But we have three more sources, pardon my French, to take a look at. And from one neutral party to the next, we'll take a look at Al Jazeera. Come on. One would most evidently hope that Al Jazeera isn't tainted with what they're covering, right? They don't have a horse in this game, so why? Well, given the fact that it's Al Jazeera and on their homepage, if you look up the election site, there is an active countdown to when the election commences. You understand that it's a huge deal. But what does Al Jazeera say? And is it clearly biased towards one side or not? Well, basic coverage from Al Jazeera also highlights more or less the same thing. Something about Elon Musk's scheme about paying people out giveaways and how they are halted because of Philadelphia, how Biden voted early, how a comedian, one of the best of his time, I must say, Tony Hinchcliffe, appeared at the Trump rally. What did Kamala say in the rally? So mostly it's all about rallies. And then you see an explainer wherein they're fact-checking Trump's biggest rally that was in MSG, Madison Square Garden, in New York City, which was a resounding success from what a lot of people are saying. But you don't really see a lot of polls that are directly mentioned. Of course, you see Michelle Obama, you see Trump, you see a lot of voting that is either or, but you don't see the same kind of rhetoric that the BBC has. Now, is this because Al Jazeera did not want to source polls from either news organizations that were in the US? Because of the fact that they are either left or right, and it's extremely difficult to come across a national news organization in the US today that is neutral? Well, most of them claim they're neutral, but clearly they're not, right? So Al Jazeera did not post any of these. Now, of course, if you dive deep into any one of these articles, there could be a choice. There could be that you find some of the other poll references. But the fact that they give you articles and then they give you opinion pieces, but they don't take the same stand as the BBC does, paints a different picture about Al Jazeera. Then it's time to move to CNN, who every single right leaning person, even on X, and well, some left leaning people as well, and some neutral parties claim blatantly CNN is left leaning. And well, haven't really refuted that claim. So, what does CNN tell you? Well, apart from ads running as their headers, they do have an election center, it seems. As you scroll further, the main page for CNN's election coverage will give you three different sections, right? Trump's rally, strategist who grew up in Puerto Rico has a message for Trump. Is that positive? Is that negative? Clickbait. Republicans appeal Pennsylvania's naked ballot voting rule to Supreme Court. Again, is that a shot at Republicans? Is that not? You have to open up the article, go through it. But we're looking at what the main page highlights. We're not going to dive deep into articles because that opens up a can of worms that cannot be contained. You keep making deeper dives, I'm sure you're going to find out biases of some sort sooner or later. But that's purely because of the writers that put together these articles. And you can't really blame the actual content on the host at that point in time. Yes, they did hire them. Yes, it should go through the editor and the editor in chief. But in times like these, where the elections are on your head and you want to keep up with the 24-hour news cycle to stay relevant, things slip through the cracks. What can you say? But election countdown, you see predictors, and finally you see what everyone was looking for, the CNN polls and averages. So what does the CNN poll say? 48% for Harris and 47% for Trump. And well, a disclaimer is visible. And what does that say? The CNN poll of polls aggregates and averages a number of recent polls, it seems. If the margin between the candidates is 3 points or less, there is no clear leader to the race. The latest poll of polls includes results from CBS, ABC, CNN, NYT, and the Times of London. So at least what they've done is they've tried to be as transparent as they possibly can be when it comes to, okay, this is what the poll of the entire country currently states. 48 to 47 is a cutthroat race that people were not expecting. The left expected it to be a landslide victory for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. The right expected it to be a landslide victory for Trump and Vance. And here we are, when we're looking at an election that is almost as close as it was in 2016 when Trump was going up against Hillary. Now, does that leave a lot of people shocked? Does that leave a lot of people wondering what will actually happen when the results come out? Yes, but most importantly, on a global rhetoric, on a global scale, it leaves all of these economies that are going to be completely influenced by when the results actually get declared to hold their breath and sit still. All of these markets are not going to be burdened beforehand. All of these speculations are not going to greatly influence stock markets in various countries, which is a good thing, which is something that people like us who are sitting in these countries should be kind of pleased about. You see, if this was a landslide victory for the left, you are bound to experience some amount of impact on your economy based on where your current government and the people in your country lean. And the same goes for the right. If it was a landslide for the right, it would have been the same exact thing. Either or, people would have lost out on a bunch of money when it came to the economies of countries that are influenced by the likes of the United States, which is 99% of the world. Let's be honest. Yes, a lot is changing with the implementation of BRICS, 15 years strong, and things have changed. De-dollarization has gone to whole new lengths, and yet we are today looking at a point wherein an election of the United States might not be as influential on the rest of the world as it was earlier known to have been. But before we leave, it's only right to take a look at the right. So, Fox News, infamously right leaning. And what does the Fox News election page have for us today? Well, Democracy 24 election results and updates will be shown here. Okay, fair enough. Latest election news, a few different articles. And finally, they have a map of the states that they believe are going to be either solid Republican states, solid Democrat states, or likely Democrat, likely Republican, and toss ups. Toss ups are essentially what a lot of other people call swing states that aren't really leaning either way or are not showing traits of leaning either way this year. This map. Is this purely speculation? Yes, it is. And Fox says so themselves, right? They're based on power rankings. Can these be incredibly accurate? Can you expect a drastic switch up in California, for example? No, you can't. It's a fact that people in California will vote Democrat. And the same goes for, well, states like, let's say, Arizona, states like Kentucky. They're gonna stay right. The toss ups, the likely Democrat, the likely Republican states, the fact that Texas this year is likely Republican and not solid Republican says a lot. And the same thing goes for Florida. Florida is likely Republican and not solid Republican. That says a lot. Another thing that left me kind of wondering as to what was going on is when I looked at Alaska and I saw that Alaska is labeled as solid Republican. Uh, but either I've been extremely ill informed about Alaska and its voting preferences, but I did not know that Alaska votes solid Republican. Be that as it may, this leaves us to believe that there is a lot out there when it comes to the election results and the speculations that should be taken with a grain of salt. And hell, if you ask me, I'll say take everything with a grain of salt. We, as an outsider to this election, are well affected by it in various capacities. Our economies are greatly affected by it, and if we're living under a rock and believe that they aren't, unless we live in a closed economy, they sure as hell are. Well, so what does Fox have for us apart from all of that? Well, nothing much really. It's got 2024 choice of president if voting now. And surprisingly, they have also labeled the fact that currently Biden and Harris, which I don't know why they haven't changed up. Oh, wait, these are from August 2023 to July 2024, hence why it hasn't been changed up. Sad. Why has Fox News not put up a new poll with the updated candidates for Democrats? It makes no sense to me. Be that as it may, some laziness going on here with the Fox election coverage. But in a nutshell, what we know today is the fact that irrespective of what happens in this election, be it your news consumption from the left or the right, or you go for a news that is supposedly neutral in the BBC, or you go for one like Al Jazeera, you're going to be left with more or less the same insights, which is the fact that this race is neck and neck. 47 to 48, 48 to 47, 50 to 51, stuff like that. Do you know for a fact if one party is going to completely landslide the other? Absolutely not. And luckily, the outright influence of these results or the speculations of both aren't influencing economies just yet. What happens once the results get declared? Well, that entirely depends on which candidate and which party comes into power for the next 4 years. One can only hope that our economies stay strong, that whoever comes in power has more of a global approach, is not completely going to brush aside geopolitics for nothing to be more driven towards what the United States needs, which is of course it's a good thing you're more country driven. Yes, I understand that every elected leader should be, but to neglect the rest of the world is a mistake in today's era and should be considered so. Also, the UN and the fact that America holds a very strong seat in both the Security Council and every other body that the UN currently harbors should say a lot about what the leader of the free world, the so called leader of the free world that is often labeled to be the president of the United States, has when it comes to every aspect of geopolitics. Let's not isolate the global south. Let's not isolate any nation. And let's hope that whatever happens, everything works out. Yep, that's it. There's no point in dragging this out any further. We'll see you guys on election day once we know what the results are. And we will try and comprehend what the markets do that day. We'll try and comprehend what the reactions of the people are from some of the most influenced countries that day. And hopefully, things get better. Hopefully, the world moves towards a better, more balanced place for us all. Until then, I'll see you guys real soon. This has been your Morning Cup.